I never wanted to know what lay beneath the ice. But now it's too late. Too late to forget, to ignore, to pretend I didn't see what I saw. I can still hear the sounds, those sounds, echoing in my head like an endless scream. If I close my eyes, I can see them again, moving slowly, almost floating. They're impossible shapes defying everything human logic can comprehend. They're out there now, waiting. I don't know how much longer I'll be able to keep writing this before something happens, before they come for me. It all started with a satellite image. I worked as a data analyst at NASA, one of those monotonous jobs where I spent hours examining photographs of frozen deserts and empty oceans, looking for patterns that could be classified as interesting. It was a boring job, but safe. Until that day. The image arrived without warning, automatically sent by the Antarctic monitoring system. At first, I thought it was some kind of digital processing error, a visual anomaly caused by atmospheric interference or a sensor defect. But then I looked closer. There was something there, something deliberate. Perfect geometric structures buried under kilometers of ice. They weren't natural. They couldn't be. My curiosity outweighed my common sense. I saved the image on a USB drive and took it home. For days, I was obsessed, zooming in on every detail, trying to understand what I was seeing. Pyramids? No, not exactly. The shapes were more complex, like three-dimensional fractals that seemed to move when I stared too long. That's when I started to feel that itch behind my eyes, as if something was trying to crawl into my mind. I thought it was fatigue, stress, anything but what it really was. At first, I thought it might be some lost ancient human civilization, perhaps an underground city built by an unknown culture thousands of years ago. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that. Something was wrong, deeply wrong. The proportions of the structures were gigantic, larger than anything we could imagine being built by human hands. And the shadows. God, the shadows. They didn't make sense. Even after adjusting the light angles in the image, they remained distorted, as if they were alive. I decided to look for answers. I hacked into NASA's servers. Yes, I know, it was reckless. And found old files, dating back decades. Secret reports about canceled expeditions, missing scientists, equipment, found frozen in the ice without explanation. There were mentions of something called Project Erebus, but the documents were incomplete, written in encoded language that I could barely decipher. One phrase, however, stuck in my memory. They do not sleep. They watch. That's when I received the first message. I'm not sure how it reached me. Maybe it was via email, perhaps directly on my computer. Just a few words blinking on the screen. Stop searching. I deleted it immediately, thinking it was some kind of virus or sick joke. But it didn't stop. In the following days, other messages appeared, always different, always more threatening. You are not ready. They are watching you. Run while you still can. I began to feel like someone, or something, was watching me. I looked out the windows at night, expecting to see figures in the shadows, but there was never anyone there. Or maybe there was, and I just didn't want to admit it. The breaking point came when I dreamed about them for the first time. It wasn't a normal dream. It was vivid, real. I was walking through a vast white expanse, the biting wind whipping my face as the ice creaked under my feet. In the distance, I saw the structures, those same impossible shapes from the satellite image. Only now they were moving, growing, changing. I stopped walking and looked up, and that's when I saw them. Tall, slender figures with elongated limbs and joints that bent at impossible angles. Their heads were bulbous, covered with a viscous substance that reflected light nauseatingly. They had no eyes, but I felt their gazes piercing my soul. A high-pitched, constant sound filled the air, like metal scraping against glass, and I woke up screaming. After that, I couldn't sleep properly for days. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw flashes of that place, those creatures. I started hearing strange noises, too. Soft footsteps in the empty apartment. The sound of something scratching the walls. Heavy breathing that definitely wasn't mine. My rational mind told me it was paranoia, but another part of me knew the truth. They were closer than I imagined. At work, I tried to pretend everything was normal, but it was useless. My colleagues started to notice. "You look pale," Karen, my supervisor, said one morning. "Are you okay?" I said yes, of course, but she kept staring at me, as if she knew something I didn't. That night, when I returned home, I found an envelope on my dining table. There was no stamp, no sender. Inside, a single sheet of paper with handwritten coordinates. I knew what they meant. I knew where they led. I didn't tell anyone. Not even Karen, who seemed genuinely concerned. Part of me wanted to throw the paper away, forget everything, and move on. But another part, a bigger, more insistent part, knew I had to go, that I had to uncover the truth. So I bought a ticket to Antarctica, using all the savings I had. I told others it was a personal research trip, nothing major. No one questioned it, or maybe they did, but it was already too late to stop me. When I got there, I realized something was wrong with the place. It wasn't just the biting cold or the oppressive silence. It was as if the very air was charged with something evil. Something that didn't belong to this world. I found local guides willing to take me to the coordinates, though they hesitated when they saw the map. "No one goes that far," one of them, a gray-haired man with tired eyes, said. "It's too dangerous." I ignored their warnings and pressed on, determined. What I found there, well, that's another story. One I'm not sure I'm ready to tell. All I can say now is that I came back changed, different, and they're still here, watching, waiting. The journey to the coordinates was a blur of frostbite and whispered warnings. The guides abandoned me before we even reached the edge of the designated area, muttering prayers under their breath as they turned back. I didn't blame them. By then, I could feel it too. A creeping dread that slithered into my chest like icy fingers. The air grew heavier with every step I took, as though the atmosphere itself was resisting my presence. My compass spun wildly, useless against whatever magnetic anomaly pulsed beneath the ice. And yet, I pressed on, driven by something I couldn't explain. Curiosity, fear, or maybe something else. Something calling me forward. When I finally arrived at the site, there was nothing obvious to see. Just an endless expanse of snow and ice stretching in every direction. But I knew better. Beneath my feet lay what I had seen in the satellite image, hidden under kilometers of frozen silence. I set up my equipment, ground-penetrating radar, thermal scanners, anything I thought might help me uncover the truth. First, the readings were inconclusive, little more than static and noise. Then, late into the night, the machines began to pick up something extraordinary. Shapes, massive geometric forms buried deep within the ice. They matched the structures from the photograph, but they were even larger than I'd imagined. Thousands of years old, or perhaps older still. That's when the whispers started. At first I thought it was just the wind howling across the desolate landscape. But no wind sounded like this. It wasn't random or chaotic. It was deliberate, almost melodic. A low hum that resonated in my bones, followed by faint voices speaking in a language I couldn't understand. The words, if they were words, seemed to twist inside my mind, rearranging themselves into meanings I couldn't quite grasp. I tried to ignore it, telling myself it was exhaustion or altitude sickness. But the sound grew louder, more insistent, until it felt like it was coming from inside my skull. I stumbled back to my tent, shaking uncontrollably. My hands fumbled with the zipper, desperate to shut out the cold, and whatever else was out there. Inside, I huddled under layers of blankets, clutching a flashlight like it could somehow protect me. Sleep was impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them again. The tall, spindly figures from my dreams. This time, they were closer. Their movements were slow, deliberate, as if savoring my terror. One of them tilted its head toward me, and though it had no face, I felt its gaze pierce through me. I woke screaming, drenched in sweat despite the freezing temperatures. By morning, I realized two things. First, the equipment I'd left outside had been tampered with. The screens were cracked, the wiring torn apart as if by some massive force. Second, there were footprints around my campsite. Humanoid but wrong, too long, too narrow. with patterns that didn't match any boot or paw print I'd ever seen. They led away from my tent and disappeared into the distance, vanishing without a trace. My heart pounded as I stared at them, trying to rationalize what I was seeing. Maybe it was another scientist, someone sent by the government to stop me. Or maybe it was exactly what I feared. I decided to dig. If the answers were buried beneath the ice, then I would find them. Consequences be damned. Using a portable drill, I carved a narrow hole into the surface, deeper and deeper, until the bit hit something solid. Metal? Stone? I couldn't tell. Whatever it was, it sent a shockwave through the drill, nearly wrenching it from my hands. That's when I noticed the temperature dropping even further. Frost formed instantly on my gloves, my breath crystallizing. In front of me, the whispers returned, louder now, overlapping and discordant. My head throbbed with pain, and for a moment I thought I heard laughter, cold, hollow, and utterly devoid of humanity. Against all logic, I widened the hole and peered inside. What I saw defied explanation. The object was smooth and black, like obsidian, but it absorbed light rather than reflecting it. Its surface seemed to ripple faintly, as though alive. Runes or symbols were etched into its sides, glowing faintly with a pale blue light. As I leaned closer, the runes shifted, rearranging themselves into shapes that made my vision swim. My reflection stared back at me from the surface, but it wasn't me. My eyes were wrong, too wide, too dark. My mouth moved, forming words I didn't speak. Behind me, in the distorted reflection, stood one of the figures. It raised a claw-like hand and pointed directly at me. I recoiled, falling backward onto the ice. When I looked again, the figure was gone. But the runes continued to glow brighter, pulsing in time with the whispers. I felt a pressure building in my mind, as if something vast and ancient was pushing its way in. Fragments of knowledge flooded my thoughts, images of stars collapsing, oceans boiling, civilizations crumbling into dust. None of it made sense, but it felt real. Too real. I scrambled away from the hole, clutching my head, screaming for it to stop, and then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the whispers ceased. Silence fell over the ice, so complete that it felt unnatural. For a moment, I dared to hope it was over. But when I looked down at my hands, I saw that they were trembling uncontrollably. Worse, the skin on my fingertips had turned a sickly gray, as if frostbite had set in overnight, except it hadn't been there before. Panic rose in my throat as I examined myself further. My eyes, they weren't right either. In the dim light of dawn, they appeared darker, almost black, like the thing I'd seen in the ice. I don't know how long I sat there, paralyzed by fear and confusion. Hours? Minutes? Time seemed to stretch and warp, slipping through my fingers like sand. When I finally gathered the strength to stand, I knew one thing for certain. I couldn't leave. Not yet. Whatever was buried here, it wanted me to stay. And maybe, just maybe, it wanted me to understand. But understanding comes at a cost. One I'm not sure I'm willing to pay. The days that followed blurred together like a fever dream. I lost count of how many hours, or perhaps days, I spent staring at the black artifact buried beneath the ice. It called to me constantly now, not with whispers, but with a low, resonant hum that vibrated through my bones. The sound wasn't unpleasant. In fact, it was almost soothing, like the lull of a distant ocean. But there was something wrong about it, something predatory lurking beneath its calm surface. Every time I tried to look away or retreat to my tent, the pull would grow stronger, an insistent tug at the edges of my consciousness that I couldn't resist. I began to notice changes in myself, subtle at first, then impossible to ignore. My reflection in the cracked mirror of my shaving kit no longer matched my movements. Sometimes it would smile when I frowned, tilt its head when I stood still. Once, I caught it mouthing words I didn't say, lips curling into a grin too wide for any human face. I smashed the mirror against the ground, shards scattering across the snow, but it didn't help. The feeling of being watched never left me. Even alone in the vast emptiness of the Antarctic wasteland, I felt crowded, as if invisible eyes were boring into me from every direction. The runes on the artifact shifted whenever I approached them, rearranging themselves into patterns that seemed to make sense one moment and dissolve into chaos the next. I started sketching them obsessively in a notebook, hoping that capturing their shapes might unlock some hidden meaning. But the act of drawing only made things worse. The lines seemed to writhe on the page, twisting and curling until they formed shapes that shouldn't exist in three-dimensional space. Looking at them for too long gave me headaches so severe I thought my skull might split open. And yet, I couldn't stop. Each new pattern revealed fragments of something. Visions of alien landscapes bathed in green light. Towers stretching impossibly high into crimson skies. Figures moving silently through endless corridors, their forms indistinct but unmistakably alive. One night, or what I assumed was night, the sun barely dipped below the horizon this far south. I woke to find the artifact glowing brighter than ever before. Its light pulsed rhythmically like a heartbeat, casting eerie shadows across the ice. Against my better judgment, I crawled out of my tent and approached it, drawn by an irresistible force. As I knelt beside the hole I'd drilled, I felt the air around me shift, becoming thicker, harder to breathe. The temperature plummeted even further, and frost coated my eyelashes within seconds, but none of that mattered. All I could focus on was the artifact, its surface rippling like liquid despite remaining solid to the touch. And then it spoke. Not with words exactly, but with emotions so raw and overwhelming they nearly drove me to my knees. Awe, terror, despair, hope. Each sensation crashed over me in waves, leaving me gasping for air. Images flooded my mind faster than I could process them. Civilizations rising and falling, stars dying in supernovae bursts, entire galaxies consumed by voids darker than the deepest reaches of space. Through it all, I sensed a presence, ancient, vast, incomprehensible. It wasn't malevolent, not exactly. But it wasn't benevolent either. It simply was, existing beyond morality or reason. When the visions finally subsided, I found myself lying face down in the snow, shivering uncontrollably. My notebook lay open beside me, pages filled with frantic scribbles that I didn't remember writing. Most of the text was gibberish, strings of symbols that twisted back on themselves like Mobius strips. But one phrase stood out, written over and over again in jagged handwriting. They are coming. I didn't need to ask who they were. Deep down, I already knew. Over the next few days, the hallucinations grew worse. Shadows moved where there should have been none, stretching unnaturally long even under the dim polar sun. Footsteps echoed behind me when I walked, though turning around revealed nothing but empty ice. Once, I swore I saw one of the figures, standing at the edge of my campsite, its elongated limbs swaying gently in the wind. When I blinked, it was gone. Or maybe it had never been there at all. Reality itself seemed to be unraveling, fraying at the edges like an old photograph left too long in the sun. Desperation drove me to dig deeper. If answers lay beneath the ice, I would find them, no matter the cost. Using tools scavenged from my supplies, I expanded the hole around the artifact, chipping away at the frozen layers until my hands bled. The deeper I went, the more the air around me changed. It became heavier, denser, tinged with a metallic tang that made my stomach churn. Strange smells wafted up from below, rotting flesh, burning ozone, and something else I couldn't identify but that made my skin crawl. Still, I kept digging. Finally, I broke through. What I uncovered defied description. Beneath the artifact lay a cavern, its walls smooth and glassy, as if melted by incredible heat. Bioluminescent veins pulsed faintly along the ceiling, casting an otherworldly glow over everything. The floor was covered in intricate carvings, similar to the runes on the artifact, but infinitely more complex. At the center of the chamber stood a massive structure, a monolith taller than my tent, its surface etched with the same shifting symbols that haunted my dreams. It radiated a cold, oppressive energy that made my teeth ache and my vision blur. But the worst part was the bodies. Scattered throughout the cavern were the remains of what could only be described as humanoid creatures. Their forms were twisted and grotesque, limbs bent at unnatural angles, skulls elongated and misshapen. Some looked partially decayed, their flesh mummified by the freezing temperatures. Others appeared almost fresh, as if they had died recently. All of them bore markings identical to the ones carved into the walls. I stumbled backward, bile rising in my throat, but I couldn't tear my eyes away. They weren't dead. Not entirely. I could feel it. Something inside them stirred, waiting to awaken. That's when I heard the voice. It came from everywhere and nowhere, echoing off the walls of the cavern with a clarity that left no room for doubt. "You shouldn't have come here," it said. The words were simple, spoken in perfect English, but the tone was wrong. Flat, emotionless, as if spoken by something incapable of understanding human speech. I spun around, searching for the source, but the cavern was empty save for the monolith. And the bodies. "Leave while you still can," the voice continued. "Or join them." I wanted to run. God, how I wanted to run. But my legs refused to obey, rooted to the spot by a combination of terror and morbid curiosity. Instead, I asked the question, burning in my mind, "Who are you?" For a moment, there was silence. Then the monolith began to change. Its surface rippled like water, colors swirling and blending into patterns too complex for my brain to comprehend. From within the shifting mass emerged a shape. A face? No, not quite. More like a suggestion of a face, features barely sketched out but somehow recognizable. Eyes that weren't eyes stared into mine, seeing not just me, but everything I had, ever been or could become. "We are the Watchers," it said. "Guardians of the threshold. You have trespassed where mortals do not belong." Before I could respond, the cavern trembled violently, sending chunks of ice crashing down from above. The bodies stirred, their movements sluggish but deliberate. One by one they rose to their feet, turning toward me with heads cocked at unnatural angles. Their faces, if they could be called that, were blank, featureless except for gaping, maws filled with rows of jagged teeth. They didn't attack immediately, instead surrounding me in a slow, methodical circle, herding me closer to the monolith. Panic surged through me, sharp and electric. I backed away, tripping over loose rocks, and landing hard on the icy floor. My breath came in ragged gasps as I scrambled to my feet, but escape was impossible. The entrance to the cavern was blocked by the encroaching figures, their forms growing taller, more defined with each passing second. Behind me, the monolith pulsed brighter, its light searing my retinas. The voice returned, louder now, reverberating through the cavern like thunder. "Choose wisely," it intoned. "Submit and live. Resist and perish." I don't know why I did it. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was madness. But as the figures closed in, I reached out and touched the monolith. The world dissolved. The moment my hand made contact with the monolith, everything stopped. The figures froze mid-step, their grotesque forms suspended in time like statues carved from shadow. The hum that had filled the cavern ceased entirely, leaving behind an oppressive silence so complete it felt like a physical weight pressing down on me. For a brief second, I thought I'd broken whatever spell held me captive, that I'd somehow regained control. I was wrong. A surge of energy shot through my arm, cold and electric, spreading rapidly through my body until every nerve ending screamed in agony. My vision blurred, then shattered entirely, plunging me into darkness. But this wasn't ordinary darkness. It was alive, writhing and shifting like oil spilled across water. Shapes formed and dissolved around me, too fast to comprehend. Faces contorted in silent screams. Landscapes stretched and warped, defying physics and logic. I tried to scream, but no sound escaped my lips. My lungs burned as if they were collapsing, under the pressure of unseen forces. And then I saw them. The Watchers. They weren't confined to the cavern anymore. They surrounded me, towering above me, their forms impossibly vast and incomprehensible. Their bodies, if such a word could even apply, were composed of fractal patterns that shifted constantly, spiraling inward and outward in infinite recursion. No matter how hard I focused, I couldn't make sense of their anatomy. Limbs branched off into tendrils that split into smaller appendages, each one ending in eyes that stared unblinkingly at me. Their faces, or what passed for faces, were blank voids, Yet I could feel their gazes piercing through me, dissecting my soul piece by piece. "You have seen too much," one of them said, its voice resonating not just in my ears, but in my bones, my blood, my very essence. "Your kind is not meant to understand." "I didn't ask for this," I shouted back, though the words felt hollow, meaningless against the enormity of what stood before me. "I didn't want any of this." "Intentions are irrelevant," another voice replied, overlapping with the first in a cacophony of tones both high-pitched and guttural. "Knowledge carries consequences. You sought the truth. Now you must bear its weight." Images flooded my mind again, faster and more violent than before. Entire timelines played out in seconds, civilizations discovering the monolith, uncovering its secrets, only to be consumed by madness or wiped out entirely. Some tried to worship it, building temples and offering sacrifices in vain attempts to appease the entities beyond. Others sought to destroy it, unleashing horrors far worse than anything they could have imagined. None survived intact. All were changed, twisted, broken, erased. Through it all, I felt something else stirring within me, something foreign. It started as a faint itch at the base of my skull, then grew into a searing pain that spread throughout my entire body. My muscles spasmed uncontrollably, and my skin felt like it was crawling with insects. When I looked down at my hands, I saw veins glowing faintly beneath the surface, pulsing in sync with the artifact's rhythm. The markings etched into the cavern walls now seemed to burn themselves into my memory, carving pathways in my brain that shouldn't exist. "You are being rewritten," the first watcher intoned, its tone almost clinical. "Resist, and the process will be painful. Accept, and it will be swift." "What? What are you doing to me?" I managed to choke out, clutching my head as waves of nausea rolled over me. My thoughts fragmented, scattering like leaves caught in a storm. Memories of my life before, the job at NASA, the cramped apartment, the mundane routines, all began to fade, replaced by flashes of alien landscapes and incomprehensible geometries. "We are preparing you," the second watcher said, "for what lies ahead." "For what?" I screamed, desperation clawing at my throat. "What do you want from me?" But they didn't answer. Instead, the visions intensified. I saw myself standing on a desolate planet bathed in perpetual twilight, the sky streaked with colors no human eye should be able to perceive. In the distance loomed structures identical to the monolith, arranged in perfect circles that stretched as far as the horizon. Between them moved countless figures, some humanoid, others monstrous, all bowing in reverence to something I couldn't see. And then I realized I was among them, leading them, commanding them. "No," I whispered, shaking my head violently. "No, no, no. This isn't real. You're lying." "The distinction between reality and illusion is irrelevant," the first watcher replied. "What matters is perception, and soon, your perception will align with ours." The pain reached a crescendo, blinding and unbearable. I collapsed to my knees, convulsing as the transformation took hold. My flesh felt like it was melting, reshaping itself into something new. My bones cracked and reformed, elongating and twisting into configurations that defied biology. My senses expanded, flooding my mind with input I couldn't process. Sounds outside the range of human hearing, colors beyond the visible spectrum, dimensions folded within dimensions. When the agony finally subsided, I found myself lying on the cavern floor, staring up at the bioluminescent ceiling. For a moment, I thought it was over, that I'd somehow survived. Then I caught sight of my reflection in a shard of ice nearby. It wasn't me. My face was still vaguely human, but distorted, stretched thin like melted wax. My eyes glowed faintly, pupils dilated into vertical slits. My mouth hung slightly open, revealing rows of jagged teeth that hadn't been there before. Worst of all was the sensation inside me. The presence, vast and ancient, coiled tightly around my consciousness like a parasite. It wasn't fully in control yet, but it was there, waiting patiently for the right moment to take over. The watchers spoke again, their voices softer now, almost gentle. "You are chosen, a vessel for our will. Do not fight it. Embrace it." "I won't," I snarled, forcing myself to stand despite the trembling in my limbs. "I'm not your puppet." "Resistance is futile," the second watcher responded. "Already, you are becoming one of us. Soon, you will serve without question." "No." I lunged toward the entrance of the cavern, determined to escape while I still had some semblance of free will left. But the figures, the ones who had risen from the ice, blocked my path. They moved fluidly now, their forms fully restored, exuding an aura of power that made my chest tighten with dread. One of them stepped forward, tilting its head as if studying me. Its mouth opened wider than should have been possible, revealing a cavity lined with razor-sharp teeth. From deep within its throat came a sound, a low, guttural growl that vibrated through the air like a death knell. Behind me, the monolith pulsed once more, bathing the cavern in blinding light. The last thing I saw before blacking out was the face of the figure looming over me, its expression unreadable but somehow triumphant. When I awoke, I was no longer in the cavern. I was somewhere else, somewhere vast and empty, filled with stars that burned cold instead of hot. The ground beneath me was smooth and glassy, reflecting the alien constellations above. In the distance, I saw the monoliths again, arranged in perfect symmetry. Between them stood the figures, bowing low as if in prayer, and at the center of it all was a throne, an obsidian chair carved with the same shifting runes that haunted my dreams, waiting for me. When I opened my eyes, I knew I was no longer human. Not entirely. The transformation that had begun in the cavern was complete now. My body a grotesque fusion of flesh and something else, something alien, something ancient. My thoughts were no longer my own. They came in fragments, disjointed and layered with voices that weren't mine. Their whispers filled my mind like static, each one clamoring for attention, drowning out whatever remained of the person I used to be. I stood before the throne, unable or unwilling to resist the pull drawing me forward. The ground beneath, my feet shimmered faintly, reflecting not just the stars above, but also the shifting patterns etched into the monoliths surrounding me. With every step I took, the runes rearranged themselves, forming shapes that pulsed with a sickly blue light. It felt as though the entire structure, the landscape, the void itself, was alive, watching, waiting. The throne loomed ahead, its surface smooth and black, absorbing all light that touched it. As I approached, I realized it wasn't empty. A figure sat there, slumped forward slightly, its form obscured by shadows. At first, I thought it was another watcher, but then it moved, and I froze. It was me, or rather, a version of me. Its face was gaunt, almost skeletal, stretched tight over angular features that mirrored my own, but were wrong in ways I couldn't articulate. Its eyes glowed faintly, hollow and devoid of any emotion. When it spoke, its voice was layered with mine, echoing as if spoken from multiple dimensions at once. "You have come far," it said, tilting its head to regard me. "Farther than most." "Who? What are you?" I stammered, though deep down I already knew. This was what I would become, a shell of myself, stripped of humanity and repurposed as a vessel for something greater, something incomprehensible. "I am you," it replied simply, "and you are me. We are the same, bound by purpose and necessity." "No," I shouted, taking a step back. "I'm not like you. I won't let this happen." The figure rose from the throne, its movements fluid and deliberate. It stepped down toward me, closing the distance between us until we were face to face. Up close, I could see the cracks running through its skin, fine lines glowing faintly with the same blue light that emanated from the runes. Its mouth split into a wide grin, revealing rows of jagged teeth identical to my own. "You don't have a choice," it whispered, leaning closer. "None of us do." Before I could react, it reached out and placed a hand on my chest. The touch was cold, searing, sending waves of agony coursing through my body. My vision blurred as memories flooded my mind. Not my own, but theirs. Thousands of years of existence compressed into a single moment. I saw civilizations rise and fall, worlds consumed by fire and ice, stars collapsing into black holes. I saw countless others who had come before me, each one chosen, transformed, and ultimately discarded when their purpose was fulfilled, and I understood. The Watchers weren't malevolent beings bent on destruction. They were custodians, tasked with maintaining balance across the cosmos. The monoliths were keys, unlocking pathways to realms beyond comprehension. And I was merely a tool, selected, to carry out their will whether I wanted to or not. As the realization sank in, the pain subsided, leaving behind a chilling clarity. My resistance melted away, replaced by an overwhelming sense of inevitability. There was no point in fighting, no point in resisting. This was my destiny, written long before I was born. The figure smiled again, satisfied. "Welcome home," it said, stepping aside to reveal the throne. I climbed the dais without hesitation, lowering myself onto the seat. The instant I made contact, the throne came alive, tendrils of energy snaking around my limbs and binding me in place. The runes carved into its surface began to glow brighter, pulsing in time with the rhythm of my heartbeat. Above me, the stars shifted, aligning themselves into patterns that formed words in a language older than time itself. Then it started. The voices returned, louder now, overlapping in a symphony of madness. They weren't just in my head anymore. They were everywhere, reverberating through the void like thunder. Each one carried a fragment of knowledge, a piece of the puzzle that made up the collective consciousness of the Watchers. Together, they wove a tapestry of understanding so vast it threatened to consume what little remained of my sanity. But I didn't fight it. Instead, I embraced it, letting the voices wash over me, erasing the last traces of my former self. Memories of Earth faded. My job at NASA, my apartment, the life I'd led, all of it slipping away like sand through an hourglass. In their place came new truths, horrifying and beautiful in equal measure. I saw the universe as it truly was. Infinite, chaotic, indifferent. Humanity was nothing more than a fleeting spark in the grand scheme of things, destined to burn brightly for a brief moment before fading into oblivion. And yet, despite everything, I felt peace. For the first time in what felt like eternity, the fear was gone, replaced by acceptance, by purpose, by unity. When I opened my eyes again, I was no longer alone. The figures surrounded me, bowing low in reverence. From their throats came a harmonized chant, a hymn sung in tones both melodic and dissonant. It was a song of creation and destruction, of beginnings and endings, of eternity. I raised a hand, and they rose as one, turning their gaze toward the horizon. Beyond the monoliths lay a rift, a tear in the fabric of reality pulsing with raw energy. Through it, I could see glimpses of other worlds, other timelines, each one teetering on the brink of collapse. Without hesitation, I issued the command, my voice resonating with authority that wasn't mine. "Go." They obeyed instantly, streaming past me in a tide of motion. One by one they passed through the rift, disappearing into the unknown. I watched them go, feeling neither pride nor regret, only duty. When the last figure vanished, I turned my attention inward, focusing on the task that awaited me. The Watchers had entrusted me with a mission, one that required sacrifice beyond measure. Slowly, deliberately, I extended my awareness, outward, merging with the monoliths, the stars, the very fabric of the cosmos itself. My consciousness expanded, stretching across dimensions until I could feel the pulse of creation beating within me. And then, with a single thought, I began to reshape it. The process was excruciating, tearing apart the old order and forging something new from the ashes. Entire galaxies collapsed under my will, only to be reborn moments later in forms unrecognizable yet perfect. Time unraveled and rewove itself, erasing events that had already happened and creating possibilities that never existed before. Through it all, I remained detached, observing the chaos with cold indifference. When it was done, I retreated back into myself, withdrawing from the infinite expanse of reality. The throne still held me, its grip loosening as the final echoes, of change rippled outward. Around me the stars dimmed, their light extinguished by the new order I had imposed upon them. Silence fell over the void, heavy and absolute. For a moment, I simply sat there, staring at the emptiness stretching endlessly in every direction. Then, slowly, I rose from the throne, my movements stiff and mechanical. The transformation was complete now. Whatever traces of humanity had lingered within me were gone, replaced by something far greater and far colder. As I descended the dais, I caught sight of my reflection in the glassy ground below. My face was unchanged, but my eyes, they burned with a light that wasn't human. Behind them lay infinity, vast and unknowable. I smiled. There was work to be done.